My family is being put through a pretty big test right now. And so I am trying to get perspective and orient my heart around what God is doing when he's testing, how to respond and how to receive what he's doing. And so I am just going to go through the word and take a look at places where he tested people. Genesis 22. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, "Abraham, here I am," he replied. Then God said, "Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, "Stay here with the donkey, while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father, Abraham, "Father?" "Yes, my son," Abraham replied. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, "but where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" Abraham answered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place that God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, "Abraham, Abraham." "Here I am," he replied. "Do not lay a hand on the boy," he said. "Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham looked up, and there in the thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." Oh, beautiful. And to this day it is said, "On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided." That should give us some comfort. On the mountain of the Lord. What is the mountain of the Lord, by the way? It's Zion. It's his church. On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, "I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies, and through your offspring all nations on earth will be blessed, because you have obeyed me." Then Abraham returned to his servants, and they set off together for Beersheba, and Abraham stayed in Beersheba. I just want to say something about that mountain of the Lord, because there's certain criteria that is required of us in order to be on that mountain, in order to be part of that mountain, that church, that temple, that body, that kingdom. And I want to make sure you know that, because I don't want for you to be deceived as in counterfeit Christianity by just thinking that God just does this. God does this for those who are in his name, for those who are in his covenant, who are on that mountain with him. So we got to make sure that we have to make sure that we're in that name, that we're receiving from him. And I prayed a little while ago with my family, and I was praying for something to happen, and then I stopped and I realized, no, I know that things don't happen until we've learned the lesson. He's taught me that. And even though I feel some fear, we're all feeling some fear, we know that God is in control, and we know that we have to learn the lesson. Things don't move forward until we learn the lesson, whatever it is that God is wanting to teach us in this situation. Exodus 15:22. Then Moses and Israel went from the Red Sea, and they went into the desert of Shur. For 3 days they traveled in the desert without finding water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink its water because it was bitter. That is why the place is called Marah. So the people grumbled against Moses, saying, "What are we to drink?" Then Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. He threw it into the water, and the water became fit to drink. There the Lord issued a ruling, an instruction for them, and put them to the test. He said, "If you listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all his decrees, I will not put on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." Then they came to Elim, where where there were 12 springs and 70 palm trees, and they camped near the water. So he issued a ruling and instruction for them and put them to the test. And he said, if you listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all his decrees, I will not put on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. I hope you can see that that's a test, you guys, that this is a test of whether we trust him to heal us, whether we trust him to be who he says he is. And so you have to understand that this is part of a covenant that he's making with us. This is part of our covenant that he's making with us, that if you listen and you obey and you do what's right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commands and keep all his decrees, he's not going to bring any of these diseases on you. He is the Lord who heals you. So when we turn away and we say, never mind, I don't want to have to pay attention. I don't want to have to listen carefully. I don't want to have to do what is right in his eyes and keep his commands and his decrees. I don't want to have to do all that. I want somebody else to take control. I want to give someone else power over healing me because it's too much work. This covenant is too much work. That is anti-covenant. And that is the reason we are not healing, because God does not yield his praise or glory to idols. That is the reason why that anti-covenant has been extended to you. That is the reason why the Antichrist right now is extending an anti-covenant to you. And you are told that it is a test. He issued a ruling and instruction for them and put them to the test. This is part of your covenant, and it is also a test to see if you are in this covenant, to see if you know who your God is. And without getting personal about what's going on, because it's not just my stuff, this is very much part of what we're dealing with right now. And it is very scary. But he is the Lord. He is the one who heals us. He is the one who gives life. He is the one who takes life. He is in charge. And the lessons have to be learned before he's going to relent. Exodus 16, the whole Israelite community set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had come out of Egypt. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into the desert to starve this entire assembly to death. Then the Lord said to Moses, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test them and see whether they will follow my instructions. So why is he testing them? To see whether they will follow his instructions. First test he gave them is to see whether they'll believe that he is the Lord their healer. He is sovereign, that he's in control, and whether or not they will obey the things that he has established. Now he's testing to see if they will follow his instructions. So he said that first to preface what he is about to do, the ways that he is building his people. On the 6th day, they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on other days. So each day they're to gather enough for that day. In this way, he will test them and see whether they are to follow his instructions. On the 6th day, they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. So Moses and Aaron said to all the Israelites, in the evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt. And in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we that you should grumble against us? Moses also said, you will know that it was the Lord when he gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning, because he has heard your grumbling against him. Who are we? You are not grumbling against us, but against the Lord. Then Moses told Aaron, say to the Israelite community, come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. While Aaron was speaking to the whole Israelite community, they looked toward the desert, and there was the glory of the Lord appearing in the cloud. The Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. Tell them, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. That evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. When the dew was gone, thin flakes like frost on the ground appeared on the desert floor. When the Israelites saw it, they said to each other, "What is it?" For they did not know what it was. Moses said to them, "It is the bread the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Everyone is to gather as much as they need. Take an omer for each person you have in your tent." The Israelites did as they were told. Some gathered much, some gathered little. And when they measured it by the omer, the one who gathered much did not have too much, and the one who gathered little did not have too little. Everyone had gathered just as much as they needed. Okay, I just want to say something here, very similar to how provision was provided for the early church. They brought together their money. They brought together the land, whatever they got from the land. They sold what they had, brought it together, and no one was provided for too much or too little. Everyone had just what they needed. Then Moses said to them, "No one is to keep any of it until morning." However, some of them paid no attention to Moses. They kept part of it until morning, but it was full of maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. Each morning, everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. I just want to I want to show you something, and I know this might be a little bit off topic, but I uploaded a video earlier and was talking about someone who sent me a message, and they had a lot of nasty things to say to me, even while acknowledging that what I'm speaking is from the Lord. But I want to show you something here. Moses became angry too. He felt angry about the wickedness of the people. It is not unusual for someone who is serving God to be grieved, to be face to face with the wickedness of mankind. Moses was doing this at the very beginning of time. I'm doing this at the very end. So it's not going to be unusual for me or anyone who's serving God to feel grieved and angry at times. It's also not going to be unusual for them to be feeling what the Holy Spirit is feeling and for what we're saying to come out in that way. It's not because I feel like I'm better than anybody. It's not because I'm arrogant. It's not because Moses felt like he was better than anyone or because he was arrogant. He just was wearied and tired of it. Like I'm wearied and tired of it. There's a lot that I see that you may not see because there's a lot that you don't see until you are actually in ministry for God. And you're working with people and getting nasty messages and seeing them fall and seeing them not care and seeing lukewarmness. You're seeing a lot. Not only that, but you're poured out for it. So I don't want you to think that that's somehow unusual. It's right here in the Bible. When people don't care, when people disobey, when people are contacting you, you got 4 and 5 people contacting you in a day, and maybe 1 or 2 in a month of those 4 or 5 a day who will actually do a fast, who will actually do what God says you're supposed to do. Return to him and he'll return to you. And actually, that's being very generous. I don't even think there's 1 or 2 a month. But let's say there are. Let's say there are 1 or 2 a month who are willing to do it. Of those 1 or 2 a month, you pour yourself out, you're offered and sacrificed to them every day, just as I am. You see that I am every single day. And then those people fall, or those people give up, or those people see what God is doing in their life. They receive it with joy and you're rejoicing with them. And then the sun comes over. And God starts telling people what is required in their covenant. And they're like, yeah, I don't want this. It's angry making. It's sickening and detestable. And yet, do I not sit here and talk with you about my sin, what I did when I was of the world? So don't misunderstand where I'm coming from. Understand it from the perspective of what's written in the Word. God's servants have feelings too. And one of the things that was said to me in that message this morning is, has God not anointed you for us? No. God hasn't anointed me for you. God has anointed me for him. I serve you because I serve him, completely without understanding. I serve you only because I serve him. If I served you, then you would be able to tell me what it is that you need from me in this ministry. But as it is, he tells me what you need from me in this ministry. He tells me what I'm going to do and say and how I'm going to say it. Please don't be misinformed about who I serve. It's very important that you know that, because that person was trying to dictate how I use the anointing that God himself gave me. That God himself decides each and every day how he's going to move me, how he's going to break me in order to deliver his message, not mine, not yours. All right, so some saved the manna from heaven, and it was full of maggots and began to smell. Each morning, everyone gathered as much as they needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much, 2 omers for each person, and the leaders of the community came and reported this to Moses. He said to them, "This is what the Lord commanded. Tomorrow is to be a day of Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake and boil what you want to boil. Save whatever is left and keep it until morning." So they saved it until morning as Moses commanded, and it did not stink or get maggots in it. "Eat it today," Moses said, "because today is a Sabbath to the Lord. You will not find any of it on the ground today. 6 days you are to gather it, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, there will not be any." Nevertheless, some of the people went out on the 7th to gather it, but they found none. Then the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commands and my instructions? Bear in mind that the Lord had given you the Sabbath. That is why on the 6th day he gives you bread for 2 days. Everyone is to stay where they are on the 7th day. No one is to go out." So the people rested on the 7th day. All right. God also commanded an entire year of Sabbath rest. Was he easy on the people? Was he building them so that he could just be easy on them? No, he was building them, and then he'd take them deeper, and then he'd take them deeper, and then he'd take them deeper. Something that the Lord was reminding me of today is that he gives enough. He promises that during that Sabbath year, he's going to give enough in the 6th year, such a blessing that he will provide for 3 years, the 6th year, the 7th year, and the 8th year. That's pretty incredible. It's a pretty incredible blessing, but it also requires a lot of faith for you to believe that. So he provided enough in the 6th year, that 6th year where they would have reaped, the 7th year where they would have rested, and also the 8th year because they wouldn't have sown in the 7th year. So they were going to need something for the 7th year and the 8th year. Isn't that incredible? In 1 year. And they had to believe that that was going to last. It was going to last till harvest. They had to trust, and they had to not try to capitalize. You know, if you have all of this food in your storehouse, then you start trying to capitalize. You're like, he gave it to me. Well, let me work the land and I'll double my yield, right? You had to not do that. It's a lot of trust that he requires of us, a lot of rest in him, believing in what he has said. You know what he was telling me today, and this is not the thing that I'm struggling with today. You know, we have something else that's going on in our family, but something that he was speaking with me about today has to do with this very Sabbath year, because he pulled me out of my careers during that Sabbath year. And then he had me giving things away. And now I'm cashing out what I yielded during that time. And I have to trust that it's going to last me during the 7th year and the 8th year, this would be the 8th year because last year was the Sabbath year. I have to trust that it's going to last me till harvest. But he has given me enough for right now. But I'm going to tell you that being in this position of wondering, is this going to last? Is this going to last? Because, here's the thing. I have been very responsible in terms of having a savings. I was living on my savings last year. This year, I'm living on my retirement. It does not feel comfortable to not have that cushion. It doesn't feel comfortable to just, have enough to live on for the 8th year. That's not comfortable for me. I don't have a pension. I don't have a career in which I have cash coming in. I don't have an income. I was self-employed, so I had to build my own retirement. I had to invest in different ways, whether it was in property or, stocks. So it's not comfortable for me to just watch it kind of dwindle and not know where it's going to be replenished. But this is what the Israelites had to trust. And it's the position that he's placed me in, and it's a position that he's placed me in in season with that Sabbath year so that he can then talk with me about that and talk through what he established. And it's actually pretty awesome that he was showing me that today. Okay, so he tested them by telling them, these are the things that, if you obey me, you follow my instructions, I'm not going to put on you any of the diseases that you saw me put on the Egyptians. I'm the Lord who sends diseases, and I'm the Lord who heals them. Now he's testing provision. He proves his sovereignty, and then he tests to see, are you going to trust in my sovereignty? That's the pattern of God. Proves himself. Now are you going to trust? I proved myself. Now you prove yourself. That's also what he's doing in his covenant. It's also what he did on Passover. He proved himself. On Pentecost, they prove themselves, right? On Pentecost, the law is given. I do my part, you do yours. Do you think God is somehow going to switch up his pattern and suddenly extend a covenant to you that he's already paid for and you don't have to receive or obey? That's lunacy, craziness to even think that. But that's what all of counterfeit Christianity believes. Exodus 17. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded. They camped at Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, give us water to drink. Moses replied, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test? But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses. They said, why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst? Then Moses cried out to the Lord, what am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me. The Lord answered Moses, go out in front of the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you by the rock at Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink. So Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel, and he called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled and because they tested the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? Ooh, that's a hard thing, isn't it? Because when we don't see him moving, we often say that, are you here or not? But the word says that's testing the Lord. We need to be careful about that, myself included. We need to know that he's here. We need to believe and stand on that and pray and remind him, because really what we're doing is reminding ourselves, right? When we're speaking that, when we're saying, hey, you did this and you did that, and you have said this and you have said that. He loves that because he doesn't need to be reminded, but what it demonstrates is that we're reminding ourselves of who he is. We're speaking on his truth and his word rather than, Lord, I want this and I want that, and you're so mean to me. Why are you doing this to me? And I did that with some people today who I called in to pray for this situation, and we're doing that. That's how we're praying. You said this and you said that. And everything's in your hand, Lord, in your hands, Lord. We trust in your will. We're standing in your truth. We're not going to turn to false gods to tell us what to do in this situation, to the experts and professionals, because you are the only expert. You are the only one who knows what you're doing in this situation. You are the one who gives life. You are the one who takes life. And we believe in your will. In Exodus 20, when God is giving them the 10 commandments, the people started to become afraid. So let's start at Exodus 20:18. When the people saw the thunder and lightning and heard the trumpet and saw the mountain in smoke, they trembled with fear. They stayed at a distance and said to Moses, speak to us yourself, or we will listen, but do not have God speak to us or we will die. Which is kind of funny because we've just gotten done reading about all of this grumbling and grief that they're, doing against Moses. But now that God's speaking to him, they're saying, speak to us yourself and we will listen, but do not have God speak to us or we will die. Oh, that's so funny. Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. God has come to test you so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning. The people remained at a distance while Moses approached the thick darkness where God was. So do not be afraid. God has come to test you so that the fear of God will be with you to keep you from sinning. One of my friends was actually quoting this to me today. That fear of God is important. It's very important that we feel that and that we know that he is sovereign. Otherwise, we start getting a little too big for our britches. And we start trying to dictate to him how things are going to go. We start grumbling against him because he's not doing things right or he's not doing it in our timeline, which I chuckle because, I mean, I've had an opportunity to do things right, and I couldn't have been more wrong. He's the only one who can make us do things correctly. I got it all wrong. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites this. You've seen for yourselves that I've spoken to you from heaven. Do not make any gods to be alongside me. Do not make for yourselves gods of silver or gods of gold." What did he say? Alongside me. Not even like in front of me. He says they shouldn't even be alongside him. Do you do that? Like, because I know that we do that. We try to supplement God's sovereignty. That makes absolutely no sense. And then we expect him to work through those false gods, right? False gods of doctors and science and therapists, not even alongside him. Certainly not in front of him, but do not make any gods to be alongside me. Do not make for yourselves gods of silver or gods of gold. Make an altar of earth for me and sacrifice on it your burnt offerings and your fellowship offerings, your sheep and your goats and your cattle. Wherever I cause my name to be honored, I will come to you and bless you. If you make an altar of stones for me, do not build it with dressed stones, for you will defile it if you use a tool on it. And do not go up to my altar on steps, or your private parts may be exposed. Hey, random little tidbit, right? That's the place to end the chapter. Not so random. I understand why we wouldn't want that. I think that's a good place to stop. That right there really gives me peace because that's the bottom line. I think that's the message right now in our life, my family's life, is don't make any gods to be alongside him. Trust him that he's going to bring us through this. We don't need the experts to tell us what to do. They don't give life. They're not in control of life. God alone gives life, is in control of life, is in control of the lessons that he wants to send. And he's doing something right now. He's doing something in each of us. He's building our faith and he's teaching us. Thank you for coming alongside me on this little journey tonight. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.